You're watching Strat News Global. I'm Amitabh Brevi, and joining us from Washington again is Dr. Kamran Bokhari. He's the Director of Analytical Development with the Center for Global Policy. Dr. Bokhari, good to see you again after a while.
Thanks for having me, Amitabh.
Dr. Bukhari, just the latest developments, and there have been quite a few of them. The reported secret meeting of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with his Mossad chief in the Red Sea city of Neom with MBS. Some reports suggest that Mike Pompeo was also there. Subsequently, you have many other reports, including the Israeli, I beg your pardon, the Saudi foreign minister denying that any such meeting has taken place, but there are other inputs from Israel which suggest that they have, including Benjamin Netanyahu not denying that meeting. This is going along expected lines, would you say?
More or less. I mean, I think, Amit, what I'm a bit sort of surprised, not a whole lot, but a bit that this happened so soon. I was thinking, maybe it'll take a little while, but I think that it seems like the Trump administration is putting a lot of energy in its sort of twilight days to get this thing going. There was a lot of criticism of Secretary Pompeo making these trips to the Middle East and whatnot, and saying, "Why are you doing this? You need to concede the election," and so on and so forth. It was seen as frivolous, if you will, on the part of the Trump administration. But now we know. Now we know what was going on, and I think that, in my opinion, the Trump administration tried to do a lot of things. Talks with the Taliban, talks with the North Koreans, tried to negotiate through maximum pressure with the Iranians. None of those things worked out, and of course the negotiation with the Chinese. This one actually, if you recall, they were talking about, the deal of the century. So we all thought, oh, you know what, there's never going to be a real deal between Israelis and Palestinians. And obviously they couldn't say ahead of time what the contours of that deal would look like. Again, now we know that, first UAE, Bahrain, and now Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has not sort of formally done it, and they're sort of one step forward and one step backward, or two steps backward, depending on how you look at it. But this is probably will be remembered as sort of the achievement of the Trump administration.
So two fronts. One, you're saying, is this the last hurrah for the Trump administration? And two, you expect the Saudis to officially deny this. Is this foundation work that is being laid?
Yes. I mean, look, it's in the benefit of the Trump administration that this comes out. It's in the benefit of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he say, look, I went to Saudi Arabia. He's creating his own legacy. Already, he is the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history. And, he's has a reputation for being a hawk. And he's basically telegraphing to the world, yes, I'm a hawk, but I'm the one who can actually do diplomacy because I'm a hawk. So this works for him. What it doesn't work for is the Saudis. They have sort of been caught off guard. Obviously, the Saudis needed to keep this quiet. And the fact that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not formally, acknowledging the visit, though he's not denying it either, shows that there was some pledges made. Again, things took a wrong turn for the Saudis. This was too much too soon. But I suspect that they had to have an inclination, or at least an inkling, that look, things like these you can't keep under the wraps, and therefore they should have had a plan. I don't think they have a plan, a PR plan for this.
In terms of what unites Israel, the Trump administration, the US at the moment, and Saudi Arabia, is the antipathy and the enmity towards Iran. Your comments on how that is developing?
Yes, I mean, look, that is sort of the common denominator. That is the impetus for all of this. But I think we're at a point now where it's not just the old acrimonious relationship that all three of them have with Iran. It's the fact that a Biden administration is coming into office,
Yeah.
and it's made very clear that it's going to have a new set of negotiations and will be working towards a version 2.0 of the nuclear deal that was cut by the Obama administration. So a lot of these things are in preparation for that. There are a lot of things that the chessboard is being set up by the Trump administration, working with the Israelis and the Saudis to shape the operating environment of the Biden administration, because they know there will be some form of negotiation. And I think that they want to be able to not be in a position that they were when they were surprised with the speed at which the interim nuclear deal was signed in the fall of 2013. So they want to be able to manage this moving forward. So all of this must be seen in that context.
Seen in that context, we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu warning against what you were referring to, the JCPOA 2.0 for the next government. So if I'm paraphrasing you, correct me, but are you saying that the Trump administration in its twilight weeks, like you put it, is looking to cement its policy? We've seen it with China. We've seen it now vis-a-vis with Iran. They tried it with Afghanistan and Iraq as well. So as to make it, like you said, the chessboard, set up the chessboard for the Biden administration. That's what they're looking forward to, make it as difficult as possible to reverse anything?
I don't think that the Biden administration will reverse anything. I think that, from the Trump administration's point of view, from the point of view of President Trump himself and Secretary Mike Pompeo, this is all about legacy. This is not the last that we will hear from either of them or other members of their administration and their broader political movement. So they're sort of setting up the game for when they won't be in office in order to stage a comeback potentially in 2024. Maybe not with President Trump. Maybe he might. It's not really clear. It's a long way off. But this is
maybe
sort of,
with Secretary of State Pompeo. Who knows?
Maybe Secretary Pompeo or somebody else. But this is something that they're doing. They don't have a whole lot of time. They want to be able to get as much done as possible. There's not a whole lot that they can do in terms of, as I listed, there were so many foreign policy ventures that didn't pan out. This one was the sort of relatively low-hanging fruit, and they've been able to do it. And this really sets them up politically, both at home and set up the region, because when you come back, you want to be able to have partners. The Saudis are going into the next year with the Biden administration with some sense of sort of trepidation as to what will happen. They would have preferred that President Trump would have been reelected. That hasn't happened. But obviously, this is sort of future planning, if you will. It is planning for the next 4 years, but it's also looking beyond that.
How will Iran plan for the next few years in relation to what's been happening? You mentioned UAE, Bahrain. There's Sudan, which is also apparently another trip from the Israelis going there as well. And the big one, which is Saudi Arabia.
Well, I think that the Iranians, I think they're prioritizing this. They've already triaged it. There was a statement from one of their officials, I think yesterday, that warning the Israelis that our advisory role in Syria, we're not going to give that up. I mean, the Iranians' approach to leveraging or shaping American perceptions, especially ahead of coming negotiations, is to sort of leverage the Israeli card, if you will. They'll make bellicose statements targeting Israelis, but what they really want is the attention of the United States. They're basically telegraphing, look, we're willing to compromise as we did before on the nuclear issue, but you're coming in this time not just talking about nukes or potential nukes, but you're also talking about our regional role, ballistic missile capability, and other things. So they're basically setting expectations that you're not going to see us budge from our involvement in Syria and the region, and you need to recognize our role in the Middle East. So I think that's what the Iranians want. I don't think they're going to look for any problems. There was some reports that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, the overseas operations arm of IRGC, its new commander who took over from Qasem Soleimani, his name is Ismail Ghani. He basically was sent to Iraq and make sure that all the proxies are avoiding any conflict with Israel or the United States, and they want to get to the Biden administration. They're looking forward to it. They're in a lot of economic, financial pain, and a lot of things are on hold. They want this negotiation to move forward. They don't want any trouble. So they'll look at this and they will use it for PR purposes. You'll see a lot of, the usual rhetoric coming out of Iran condemning the Saudis for doing this and throwing the, quote unquote, throwing the Palestinians under the bus. That's their usual rhetoric. But beyond that, I think their focus is, let's get to January 20th. Let's start the negotiations, because bear in mind, this administration, the Rouhani government, is only in office till June, or actually August, but there'll be a new election in June. And so you want to be able to get some form of deal done before that. And apparently there are reports that Khamenei himself has green-lighted and basically prioritized these conversations, these back channels with the Biden-Harris transition team.
So does it throw the Palestinians under the bus?
Well, I mean, that's one political way of looking at it. It's so that statement is very loaded. From all in many ways. For me, I think that it's very clear. I don't know if you recall my piece that when the UAE came out and said, "Hey, we are going to have relations with Israel," I made it very clear that this isn't about the Palestinians. It's very clear to every actor, including the Palestinians, the most radical of them, Hamas, that there can't be any large-scale movement on the Israeli-Palestinian front, because it's just too complicated. There are too many internal divisions between the Palestinians and, of course, between the Palestinians and the Israelis. You can't move a whole lot on that front. So what you're seeing is everything around it. And so this isn't, nobody's actually saying, well, you know what, I don't care about the Palestinians. It's an acknowledgement that in order to get get movement on the Israeli-Palestinian track, there needs to be prerequisites. The prerequisites are that the Arab states, especially the energy-rich Arab states on the Arabian Peninsula and the Gulf region, they need to have some form of a relationship with the Israelis. And so that is sort of priority. And then, from their point of view, they're saying, we'll eventually get to the Palestinians, but right now, this is what we need to do.
And you've also tweeted about Imran Khan referring to his recent interview. The Saudis at some point of time are going to publicly acknowledge what they're not publicly acknowledging now in terms of relations with Israel. Where does that leave Pakistan?
So look, I wouldn't be surprised if there's movement even on the Pakistani side. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than the prime minister saying, look, compromises need to be made. He said that on national television for the greater good. He referenced the peace treaty between the Prophet Mohammed and his adversaries in Mecca, the tribes of Quraysh. And so that's huge. When you're saying that, you're basically hinting, look, guys, don't yell at me, don't get mad at me if I do it. The Prophet did it for the greater good. So I'm not saying we're doing it right now, but if we do it, just don't come after me. So he's preparing his base and the country for some potential changes, because obviously there's some benefit. I don't know if you come across it, Amitabh, but in 2018, I published a piece in the Pakistani Daily Times, co-authored with an Israeli colleague, sort of laying out the analysis of why it could be in the strategic benefit of Pakistan to have relations with Israelis. Now, obviously, this was way before the Saudis were pressing them, the UAE thing, and I think that there is benefit. The problem is that Pakistan's social reality and political reality is as such that it's exponentially far more difficult for them to do this than it is for the Saudis even. So that just gives you sort of, how the emotional level is. And at a time when Prime Minister Imran Khan is very weak, this is an added strain on his administration.
How do you see Indian foreign policy? I mean, we have relations with everybody. Iran may be on the back burner because of US sanctions, Jawahar not really moving as India or Iran would like it to. With the Saudis, with other Gulf countries, other Arab countries, and of course with Israel, we also have a deep defense and strategic relationship. How do you see India playing its cards?
I think that India is going to be operating on multiple fronts. One is in the context of the post-American Afghanistan, where the Taliban, are becoming mainstream players. How that gives Pakistan a lot of leverage, weakens the Indian position in Afghanistan, and so the Indians will be dealing with that. But I think the Indians have far bigger issues to deal with, and that has to do with China. And I'm not just talking about Ladakh. Yes, that's happening, and there's other stuff happening all across the Indian boundary with China, as has been covered a lot in the Indian media. But I'm talking about the broader strategic picture where India will become and is becoming a major U.S. ally in the U.S. efforts to contain China. So the agreement that Secretary Pompeo and former Defense Secretary Mike Esper signed when they went to New Delhi recently, which is geospatial intelligence sharing. Yeah. That's significant. That's a BECA. That agreement is significant. It's a piece of the puzzle. We're not fully there, but it's a significant milestone. I think that, and then as you saw the other day, the United States is bringing back the First Fleet. The First Fleet used to be operational, in the years of the Second World War in the Pacific. Now the idea is to bring it back and put it somewhere in the south East Indian Ocean. So the Indians will be, working with the First Fleet in the years and decades to come. So I think India has a lot of challenges, and the fact that India does not currently have naval power projection capabilities, even within the Indian Ocean basin, means there's a lot of homework that the Indians will have to do if they're going to be a robust ally. In fact, my view is that the decision or the planning to get the First Fleet involved is a recognition on the part of Washington that, look, we're not, we can only rely on India so much right now. So I think the Americans will be working on beefing up Indian capabilities. I think India's attention moving forward is to, let's keep a hold on Pakistan relations. That's not going to go anywhere. We may make some progress, we may not, but this is the focus. This is where we need to be. And I think that that's sort of the big picture. And regardless of who remains prime minister in the years ahead, whether it's the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi or a successor, this is what New Delhi will be doing.
Right, of course. You pointed out the First Fleet. Those are plans that, again, the Trump administration or the Secretary Navy has put forward. Defense analysts would differ with you in terms of the positioning if it comes about. They don't want it in Singapore. They probably want it maybe further away in the Subic Bay or Japan. But again, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you, Dr. Bokhari. Thank you for your insight and your time.
Thank you for the wonderful questions. Thank you.
Just for our viewers, you can support our kind of journalism by going on to our website. Do also follow our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. You've been watching Stat News Global. I'm Amitabh Reddy.